New satellite images are revealing a significant shift in America's military posture in the Gulf. Patriot missile systems in Qatar have gone mobile. Refueling aircraft are being surged to the area, and fighter jets are stacking up across multiple bases. I'll have the details. New satellite imagery is giving us a much clearer look at what the U.S. military buildup in the Middle East actually looks like, and it goes far beyond a carrier group parked in the Persian Gulf. And one of the most revealing details isn't on water, it's actually on wheels. Satellite photos taken at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, that's the largest American military base in the region, show that U.S. forces have shifted their Patriot missile defense systems off of semi-permanent launcher pads and mounted them onto M983 heavy tactical trucks. Now, that's a significant move. It's a strategic move in anticipation, perhaps, of possible trouble. Patriot systems are, of course, designed to shoot down incoming ballistic and cruise missiles. On fixed platforms, they provide strong defensive coverage, but they are also stationary. Over time, fixed sites become known quantities. Adversaries map them, they calculate targeting solutions, they plan around them. In a conflict with a missile-heavy adversary like Iran, which fields large numbers of precision-guided ballistic missiles, static air defense batteries become priority targets in the opening hours of any escalation. Putting those same systems on mobile launchers, well, that changes the equation entirely. Mounted on trucks, the Patriots can rapidly reposition, of course. They can disperse across multiple locations instead of clustering in predictable spots. They can relocate after firing to avoid counterstrikes. They can shift to protect aircraft or fuel depots or command centers depending on where the threat evolves. Basically, mobility complicates an enemy's targeting strategy. Instead of a fixed set of coordinates, Iran would face a moving, shifting defensive shield. And the satellite imagery also shows a broader regional surge in air power. At Al Udeid alone, the number of KC-135 Stratotankers, it's an aerial refueling aircraft, has increased from 14 in mid-January to 18 in early February. The number of C-17 transport aircraft has jumped from 2 to 7. Reconnaissance aircraft and C-130 cargo planes are also visible. Stratotankers are key here. They extend the range and endurance of fighter jets and bombers. You surge refueling assets when you're preparing for sustained operations, not symbolic flyovers. Meanwhile, at Al Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, satellite images show 17 F-15E Strike Eagles, 8 A-10 Thunderbolts, and 4 EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft. Now, the Growlers are notable in that their mission is to jam enemy radar and communications during an air campaign. It's the kind of capability you deploy when suppression of enemy air defenses may be required. Additional aircraft increases are visible at bases in Saudi Arabia, Oman, and at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, suggesting a layered, dispersed network rather than reliance on a single hub. Taken together, this is obviously not a token show of force. It's a hardened missile defense posture combined with expanded logistics, strike aircraft, aerial refueling, and electronic warfare capability spread across multiple countries. Now, none of this implies that war is imminent or inevitable. Military planners routinely prepare for worst-case contingencies, but in short, this is what the architecture of a sustained air campaign, or preparation for a major retaliation perhaps, looks like. All right, coming up next, Mexico says nearly 78% of seized cartel firearms can be traced back to the U.S. While at the White House, President Trump met with Prime Minister Netanyahu. The Israeli Prime Minister reportedly pressed for a tougher American stance on Iran's missile program. I'll be right back. Hey, Mike Baker here. Let me take just a moment to talk about personal finances and the importance of diversifying your assets. So here's the question. Do you own physical gold? Well, in today's world, with its ups and downs and general instability, owning gold is something that everyone should consider. And here's a top tip. Acre Gold makes it simple. That's Acre, A-C-R-E. With Acre Gold, you pick a plan that fits your budget, make monthly payments, and when you've accumulated enough, they ship you a beautifully designed 24-karat Swiss gold bar. Couldn't be easier. Gold is up 70% year over year, and central banks, well, they're still buying at record levels. The reality is, smart money has been moving into hard assets for a reason, and Acre Gold makes investing and owning gold easier than ever. And, if you don't mind me saying, once you hold a physical asset like gold in your hands, well, you understand the difference between owning something real, something physical, as compared to investments that are, well, just numbers on a screen. And right now, the folks at Acre Gold are giving away 2 5-gram Ancient Collection gold bars. You can enter for free for a chance to win the gold bars and also subscribe to Gold at getacregold.com/PDB. Once again, that's getacregold.com/PDB. Welcome back to the PDB. We often talk about drugs flowing north across the U.S.-Mexico border. But there's another pipeline, and that runs south, weapons and ammunition, including military-grade .50 caliber rounds moving into the hands of the cartel, shifting the balance of power in encounters between the increasingly heavily armed cartels and the Mexican police and security forces. Let's focus on that .50 caliber issue. To understand the impact, you have to look at what these rounds are designed to do. For those of you who are unfamiliar, this is not ammunition that you use to hunt elk. I mean, unless you're a psycho. We're talking about half-inch diameter .50 caliber rounds designed for long-range penetration. These are the kind of rounds built to disable vehicles, destroy light aircraft, and strike targets from up to and more than a mile away. And according to a New York Times investigation, this level of firepower is routinely making its way from manufacturers in the U.S. to cartels in Mexico. In 2023, a Federal Security Forces helicopter in the western Mexican state of Michoacan was shot down by a cartel during a counter-narcotics operation using a .50 caliber weapon. A year later, a cartel gunman armed with a .50 caliber weapon and ammunition attacked a police convoy, piercing an armored vehicle, killing 1 officer and wounding 3 others. Mexico's then Defense Secretary, Luis Sandoval, said it plainly, quote, "The armor that we have cannot protect our personnel from this kind of penetration." And a former ATF agent who investigated gun smuggling to Mexico said these rounds, quote, "really tipped the scale in favor of the cartels," end quote. So, where is the .50 caliber ammunition coming from? Well, a major source of this ammunition is the Lake City Army Ammunition Plant in Missouri. That's a U.S. government-owned facility that produces much of the military's rifle ammunition. While Lake City primarily supplies the armed forces, agreements with defense contractors allow some military-grade ammunition to enter the American civilian market. From there, well, it can be legally purchased and then trafficked across the border. At least 16 online retailers sold armor-piercing ammunition made at Lake City or manufactured with components from the facility. Since 2012, American authorities seized at least 40,000 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition in border states, roughly 1/3 traced back to Lake City. Over the same period, Mexico's Defense Ministry reports confiscating 137,000 cartridges. 47% were linked to the same Missouri facility. And we've seen how it plays out. In another example, back in November of 2019, gunmen from the Cartel del Noreste, which is a U.S.-designated foreign terrorist organization that emerged as a splinter group of Los Zetas, opened fire in Coahuila state using .50 caliber rifles. 4 police officers, 2 civilians, and 19 cartel members were killed. Investigators recovered 45 different shell casings stamped LC, indicating Lake City manufacturer. And as mentioned, this pipeline south isn't just about bullets, it's about firearms too. Mexico's Defense Secretary, Ricardo Torvilla, said that since President Claudia Sheinbaum took office in October 2024, authorities seized 18,000 firearms. Nearly 80% of them originated in the U.S., including 215 Barrett .50 caliber rifles. But seizures tell only part of the story. A report by the group Stop U.S. Arms to Mexico estimates roughly 135,000 firearms are trafficked annually from the states across the border. In 2025, Mexican authorities recovered nearly 10,700 firearms, less than 1/10 of that estimated flow. If Barrett rifles are seized at the same rate as other weapons, about 1,800 could be crossing the border each year. So, which states are driving the firearm flows south? It's Arizona that's emerged as the primary corridor. The Stop U.S. Arms to Mexico report found that 62% of U.S.-sourced guns were recovered in Mexico within a year of purchase originated in Arizona. In 2024, Mexican authorities confiscated more firearms in Sonora, just across the border, than in any other Mexican state. All of this adds tension to an already complicated cross-border relationship. Scheinbaum called for clarification from Washington following the Times report, asking how ammunition produced for the U.S. military is entering Mexico at a rapid rate. At the same time, the Trump administration increased pressure on the Mexican government to battle cartels and curb drug trafficking to the U.S. It's a situation that, well, you would think common sense would seem to indicate is ripe for cooperation between the two governments, right? Work together to shut down both pipelines. How about that? Enhanced joint operations between the two countries to both shut down cartels and the flow of drugs and shut down the flow of weapons and ammunition that's moving south to the cartels. On paper, well, it's a great theory. In practice, it's proving to be very difficult. Okay, turning to Washington, where after nearly 3 hours, President Trump made clear that no decisions were reached in his meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, and that negotiations with Iran will continue. Despite a significant military buildup in the region and some red lines and promises to protesters, the White House appears intent on avoiding military confrontation, at least on the surface. The two leaders met at the White House yesterday in what was Netanyahu's 6th visit to the U.S. since Trump returned to office. The visit came in tandem with what we've been tracking here on the PDB. The U.S. has seriously escalated its military posture in the Middle East. Negotiations with Iran resumed last week, and Israel is watching closely to see whether Washington can broker a meaningful deal of any substance with the regime. But a post on Truth Social following the meeting revealed there wasn't much movement, with Trump writing, quote, "There was nothing definitive reached other than I insisted that negotiations with Iran continue to see whether or not a deal can be consummated," end quote. And so the message confirmed the Trump administration's mindset, at least publicly. Diplomacy remains a priority, but military action has not been taken off the table. Trump added that before last June's 12-day war, Iran chose not to strike a deal with Washington, writing, quote, "That did not work well for them. Hopefully this time they'll be more reasonable and responsible," end quote. Now, one could argue, however, that no deal is, at times, preferable to a bad deal. So far, the only deal that Iran has been suggesting is, anyway for the U.S., the international community, and the opposition in Iran that was slaughtered by the thousands, well, it's a bad deal. But the implication in Trump's comments is clear. Tehran has seen the consequences of escalation before when it refused to negotiate in a meaningful way. While Trump described the meeting as, quote, "very good," Netanyahu has long been skeptical of diplomacy with Tehran and has favored a far tougher approach. Netanyahu and his team arrived in Washington pressing to expand the scope of U.S.-Iran negotiations beyond uranium enrichment to include the Mullah's ballistic missile program and its support for proxy groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah. Many in Israel's political leadership have also openly prioritized weakening the regime itself, including support for regime change. And that's a goal that Trump did not publicly endorse. Now, Iran has signaled openness to discussing very limited concessions on one element of nuclear activities, in return, of course, for full sanctions relief. However, the regime has refused to give up enrichment entirely or broaden the scope of talks to missiles and proxy groups, maintaining that enrichment is a sovereign right and that negotiations must remain confined to the nuclear issue. Meanwhile, Trump continues to balance attempts at diplomacy with a beefed-up military posture in the region. As we've been following here on the PDB, the U.S. and Iran resumed nuclear negotiations in Oman last week for the first time since June, even as Washington deployed additional military assets. We've mentioned previously in our coverage that the American military buildup now includes Patriot missile systems and a surge in air power. And of course, at sea, Washington deployed the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group to the Middle East, and Trump said he is, quote, thinking about sending a second carrier. On Fox Business, Trump said any successful agreement would mean, quote, no nuclear weapons, no missiles, language that aligns closely with Israeli maximalist demands, even if the Trump administration continues to entertain Iran's demand that negotiations will not include their missile program. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has aligned with that broader framework, arguing that any agreement must address Iran's missile capabilities and regional activity, not just the enrichment aspect of their nuclear program. But it was the optics of Wednesday's meeting that underscored the underlying tension between the two leaders' approach to the Iranian regime. Trump and Netanyahu did not appear together before reporters or take questions together. It's a notable shift from previous visits when the two leaders stood side by side at press conferences exchanging pleasantries. And prior to the White House meeting is where we saw the most diplomatic movement. Netanyahu met separately with Rubio to formally sign Israel's membership into Trump's, quote, Board of Peace, an initiative aimed at expanding regional coordination and security partnerships in the Middle East. So where things stand between the U.S. and Iran is, well, as much the same as before the meeting. For now, Trump is keeping negotiations alive as Iran continues to make demands and try to set the parameters for any discussions. Netanyahu, meanwhile, is signaling that if U.S. diplomacy proves too narrow or fails outright, Israel is prepared to act on its own. All right, coming up in today's Back of the Brief, Russia's top diplomat says the Kremlin will continue observing New START's nuclear caps as long as the U.S. follows suit. More on that when we come back. Hey, Mike Baker here. Now, if you're like me, you've probably tried and tossed out a number of wallets in the past, right? Either they don't hold up or they don't hold enough or they hold too much. You know what I'm talking about there. One of those big leather brick wallets, right? It's overstuffed, it's falling apart, and it's uncomfortable in your back pocket. Well, then I switched to Ridge. Their slim, modern wallet holds up to 12 cards, plus cash, crafted from premium materials like aluminum, titanium, and carbon fiber, with over 50 styles to choose from. Every wallet includes RFID blocking protection, that's important, and a lifetime warranty. It's seriously the last wallet you'll have to buy. Add the AirTag attachment so you never lose it. Plus, Ridge makes premium everyday carry gear with free shipping and a 99-day risk-free trial on everything they sell. Come on, give them a try. For a limited time, our PDB listeners get 10% off at Ridge, that's RIDGE, by using code PDB at checkout. Just head on over to ridge.com and use code PDB, and you're all set. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Well, tell them the PDB sent you. In today's Back of the Brief, Russia says it will continue observing New START's nuclear limits, even though that treaty itself expired last week. After the 15-year agreement formally lapsed on the 5th of February, the immediate question was what, if anything, would replace it? While there doesn't appear to be a new treaty in the offing, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Wednesday that Moscow will keep adhering to the treaty's caps so long as the U.S. does the same. That's according to a report from the Associated Press. Speaking to the Russian parliament's lower house, Lavrov pointed to President Vladimir Putin's declaration last year to voluntarily respect New START's limits, even after Russia formally suspended its participation in 2023 due to its war in Ukraine. Lavrov said, quote, the moratorium declared by the president will remain as long as the U.S. doesn't exceed those limits. He added that Moscow will, quote, act in a responsible and balanced way, end quote, while keeping a close eye on U.S. nuclear activity. Yes, when I think of Moscow, I always think of responsible and balanced. I'm sure the Ukrainians do as well. Lavrov said that while the legal framework is gone, Moscow intends to continue observing mutually conditional nuclear restraint. As we previously covered on the PDB, Lavrov's comments come in the wake of a report from Axios that claimed Russian and U.S. negotiators, huddling on the sidelines of Ukraine peace talks in Abu Dhabi last week, discussed a temporary, informal deal to observe the treaty's limits for at least 6 months, which theoretically would give both sides time to hash out a new comprehensive agreement. When asked about the reported understanding, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said any extension would still need to be formalized, but did confirm that the issue was raised during the peace talks. Both sides also reportedly agreed to reestablish high-level military-to-military dialogue, reopening a direct communication channel between Washington and Moscow that has largely been dormant since the invasion of Ukraine. Now, as a brief reminder, New START had capped each country at 1,550 deployed strategic nuclear warheads and 700 deployed delivery systems, including intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and heavy bombers. It was the last surviving arms-control treaty limiting the strategic arsenals of the world's 2 largest nuclear powers, though in practice it was already functionally dead before it expired. Inspections under the treaty had been suspended since 2020, first due to COVID restrictions. Apparently they couldn't figure out how to conduct inspections while wearing masks, and later amid the collapse in diplomatic relations following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And as I mentioned, in 2023, Moscow formally suspended its participation, though it continued to say it would observe the limits. The White House has made it clear that it wants any durable future agreement to include China, to account for the CCP's rapidly expanding nuclear arsenal. But Beijing has shown no interest in joining a trilateral framework, and arms control was not mentioned in readouts of recent U.S.-China leadership conversations. As for the possibility of direct negotiations between Russia and the U.S., Lavrov did not signal whether discussions are imminent, and neither Moscow nor Washington has formally announced a new round of talks. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Thursday, the 12th of February. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And I hope you'll take a moment out of your day to check out our much-loved, you could almost call it beloved, YouTube channel. It's often mentioned by my family as one of the finest YouTube channels they've ever seen. You just got to search up at President's Daily Brief, of course, on YouTube. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool. Hey, Mike Baker here. Let me take just a moment to talk about personal finances and reaching your financial goals. So, okay, let's be honest. For many folks, right, currently it can seem like the math just isn't adding up. You know what I'm talking about. Between the grocery bills and the gas bills and utility bills and those skyrocketing insurance premiums, well, it can be tough to make ends meet. Even with a steady job, more families are being forced to rely on high-interest credit cards to cover expenses. So if you're a homeowner caught in that cycle, right, carrying balances with interest rates in the 20s or even 30s, it's time to get some relief. And the folks at American Financing, well, they're helping homeowners pay off that high-interest debt at rates in the low fives. Their salary-based mortgage consultants build exit strategies to help you get out from under that debt. On average, they're saving their customers $800 a month. Plus, if you start today, you may even delay the next 2 mortgage payments. There are no upfront fees just to find out how much you can save. Look, America's home for home loans is American Financing. The number is 866-885-1881. That's 866-885-1881. Or just visit americanfinancing.net/PDB.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.